Today, Friday, the 10th of April 2020, marks the 27th year of the day on which the SACP General Secretary, Comrade Hani, was brutally murdered on the Saturday of that Easter weekend in 1993. When he was killed, Comrade Hani was the General Secretary of the SACP and a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. He had acted as the Chief of Staff of Umkhonto weSizwe, the military wing of our liberation movement that was jointly founded by the ANC and the SACP. Every year, on 10th of April, we hold the annual Hani commemoration at the Thomas Gobi Memorial Park in Ekurhuleni, where he lies buried. We do so in collaboration with the Ekurhuleni municipality, where Comrade Hani lived and was granted the freedom of the city. We had planned a mass commemoration ceremony this year, as we always do. However, in consultation with the Hani family, led by Mayor Hani, and also through her advice, we collectively decided to not proceed with the commemoration today as a mass commemoration in order to fall in line with the lockdown as part of fighting the coronavirus COVID-19. The discipline of the Communist Party and its members must be exemplary and beyond reproach. We support the measures to protect life and save humanity. Humanity is now in the midst of a global public health emergency caused by the deadly novel coronavirus. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa had to declare a national state of disaster. As in many countries across the world, our government has further declared a nationwide lockdown, which applies during this period, which yesterday was extended by the President to the 30th of April 2020. This is one of the reasons why we are against assassinations, murder, violence, and abuse. We value life. The late Comrade Hani was killed mainly because he valued life for millions of our people and struggled so that they would not just have life, but would have a better life that is free from hunger and disease. The gun that ended Comrade Hani's life was meant to ensure that our people remain in perpetual bondage, hunger, and exploitation. It was meant to throw our country into a civil war with more bloodshed, whereafter thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives would have been lost, and the likes of the murderer Janus Walus had hoped that their likes or their ilk would emerge as perpetual slave masters who would have frustrated the birth of a democratic South Africa. As the SACP, just like Comrade Hani, we resolutely stand for human rights, and the right to life is second to none. We want to make use of this moment to also warn those involved in acts of domestic and gender-based violence. We are concerned as the SACP that during the first week of the lockdown, the helpline, which is used to report gender-based violence, had received about 87,000 calls. Such despicable actions are both against the law and are also a hindrance in our struggle to defeat COVID-19. We call upon our communities, just like Hani did, to stand up against gender-based violence, which unfortunately seems to be at higher level and is increasing during this very difficult period of a lockdown. By last night, the 9th of April, more than 1.5 million people across the world had contracted the highly contagious disease COVID-19. In South Africa, there were over 1,700 confirmed positive cases and 13 deaths attributed to the disease. Globally, there were over 83,000 deaths attributed to this COVID-19. In order to properly understand the nature of the struggle and the challenge before us, it is important that our SACP cadres and generally cadres of our movement are armed with appropriate theoretical and political understanding of the political economy of COVID-19. Some of the contemporary analysis of pandemics point to these being a product of the continuing destruction of the global environment by the rampant dominant regime of capitalist accumulation, especially its neoliberal version. The epidemiological outlook, in other words, the way the disease is likely to unfold, is already looking extremely disturbing. There is also strong evidence that the difficulties that are facing even advanced capitalist countries in dealing with COVID-19 have to do with the privatization of healthcare and the running down of public health systems. Therefore, the challenge before us is clear, as we remember Comrade Chris Hani. The struggle against COVID-19 must simultaneously be a struggle against capitalism and its greed, and also to intensify the struggle for access to health by all. The outbreak of COVID-19, as well as the current crisis of capitalism, show how Hani was right to become a socialist and choose socialism as the only alternative and sustainable solution to address the problems facing humanity. It is also worth taking note that as humanity is grappling with COVID-19, we are now hearing more about necessity for solidarity, for common and collective effort in defeating the disease, and the need to care. All of these, by the way, which are basic socialist concepts and commitments. We hardly ever hear now of the role of the capitalist market in defeating COVID-19, but the concept of the market has completely disappeared, which actually shows that the only way forward for humanity is collective action, is solidarity, and is caring, and is holding each other together. In other words, a more humane society than the greed of capitalism. Hani, shortly before he was killed, he led a very important SACP campaign, which was called at the time the Triple H, the fight against hunger, homelessness, and for access to health for all. In many ways, this campaign was visionary as it understood the necessity for a public health system that is accessible to all our people. That is why, as we remember Chris Hani today, we must intensify the very same Triple H campaign. But of course, today, we must intensify the struggle to realize the National Health Insurance, the NHI. On this note, the SACP once more calls on all people in our country to observe the national disaster regulations and the nationwide lockdown so as to contribute to the victory against COVID-19. As we remember Comrade Chris Hani today, we are also faced with a deep economic crisis in our country and in the SADC region. It is indeed shameful that as we seek to grapple with COVID-19, the rating agencies do what they are good at, pushing for the creation of conditions for intensifying capitalist exploitation, irrespective of what developing and poor countries are facing today. To these rating agencies, it does not matter that we are facing a life and death struggle against COVID-19. It does not matter to them that their decisions to downgrade us may worsen the socio-economic conditions of the majority of our people. To them, we must always be made to remember that we must always take decisions as far as they are concerned that favor capitalist accumulation. These rating agencies are heartless. They have no humanity and do not care about the situation of the overwhelming majority of our people. Otherwise, why downgrade in the midst of a global pandemic which is already making lives of our people so difficult? As the SACP, in the here and now, we want to take this opportunity to reiterate the statement issued by the Alliance Secretariat earlier this week, which was released on Monday, the 6th of April. In particular, we want to caution against any decision that may surrender our right to determine our own economic policy and direction. As the SACP, we are in full agreement with the Alliance statement to reject going to the IMF or the World Bank with a begging bowl. Instead, we are calling for prioritization in mobilizing our own domestic financial and other resources, including the 8 trillion rands in pension and provident funds. We are not, as the SACP, calling for reckless use of such funds, but for these funds to be invested into infrastructure and other productive sectors of our economy that are likely to create jobs. We do need to say unapologetically as the SACP, we are also calling for prescribed assets, that is, the direction of funds in pension and provident funds, in insurances, and in other sectors of the financial sector to be redirected and be invested in a productive manner, rather than these billions of rands that are often squandered and wasted by middlemen. In the immediate context, the SACP also supports the call for use of small and medium enterprises as well as cooperatives to manufacture protective clothing like masks as part of dealing with COVID-19. This, we think, is important, that much as we are faced with a difficult situation, but also in dealing with this COVID, where it is feasible to involve ordinary people, let us do so, so that they have means for sustainable livelihoods and income. The SACP also calls for the private healthcare sector not to stand aside, not only to be interested in its own profits, but to make available its huge resources to fight the pandemic. We need to unite to defend our democracy and strive for collective national, regional, continental, and world prosperity and peace. We need to continue to wage the struggle for liberation from inequality and the debt trap that many countries have been plunged deeper into, especially by the regime of international financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. It is also important that, as we remember Comrade Kisan, we also remind ourselves, no country has ever been saved or assisted to develop in favor of its people by either the IMF or the World Bank. That is why, as the SACP, we are saying, it is important that these international financial institutions must be compelled to respect our national sovereignty and our national independence in making choices that are going to benefit the overwhelming majority of our people. Rather, these international institutions should be focusing on giving grants without conditionalities to support the fight against COVID-19. That is why, as the SACP, we are also calling upon other progressive forces who have called for the writing off of debts against poor and developing countries by rich nations and the World Bank. We also, at this time in remembering Comrade Chris Hani, also calls for the uplifting of blockades and sanctions against countries as we are currently facing the COVID-19 pandemic. We call for the end to the criminal embargo against Cuba. We call for the United States not to impose any further sanction and instead to lift sanctions against Venezuela. And we also call upon the United States and other countries to lift sanctions against countries like Iran. This is no time for sanctions, but these are times to actually unite and for humanity to together fight against the current challenges that we are facing. It is for this reason that the SACP also wishes to strongly condemn the threat recently made by President Trump of the United States to withdraw US funding from the World Health Organization. This is indeed very reckless and heartless, and we must all rally behind the World Health Organization, which has been doing some important and splendid work in confronting the many pressing health problems facing humanity globally, and especially the developing countries. In memory of Comrade Chris Hani, therefore, let us deepen the struggle to protect our democracy, expand and develop it further. It is indeed important to remind ourselves about who Chris Hani was. As we have said, he served in many capacities in our Tripartite Alliance organizations. Chris Hani was a soldier. Chris Hani was involved in all the pillars of our struggle against the apartheid regime. In the armed struggle, the underground, the mass struggles, and in the national isolation of the apartheid regime. Chris Hani was involved in the SACP, the ANC, and MK operations to bring an end to oppression in our country. Chris Hani had been arrested in South Africa in 1962 and charged under the regime's Suppression of Communism Act at that time. Hani was part of very important campaigns like the Spolile Wanki campaign of Umkhonto weSizwe, which was an attempt to infiltrate MK soldiers back into South Africa. Taking our cue from Comrade Hani, therefore, we must not abandon our fight for justice, for the whole truth and circumstances surrounding his assassination to come out. Janusz Walus, the assassin who pulled the trigger, is still in jail, and he is continuing his consistent attempts at being released on parole. We are not evil or heartless people. The SACP, together with the Hani family, have said, Walus can walk out of prison a free man tomorrow. All we want is that he must tell the truth and the whole truth as to who else was involved in this dastardly conspiracy. Except for the pretense he plays out like a dramatic character seeking parole, the hard fact is that Walus has not renounced his anti-communist feelings. We are not expecting him to do so, but at the very least we expect him to speak the truth. And as the SACP, we will continue to seek full disclosure of the truth and oppose any attempts at being placed on parole. Hani's assassination was of a big magnitude. It could not have involved, as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said, only 2 people. For instance, the murder weapon that the assassins used to carry out the assassination was taken from the military. To this day, the whole truth about who took the gun has not been disclosed. The whole truth about the hit list that was found in possession of the wife to the late Clive W. Lewis, which contained the names of Nelson Mandela and Joe Slovo, has not really been fully investigated as to what was the purpose of that hit list. It is clear to us that much as we should not be looking back except by wanting the truth, we should be looking forward and saying, let us be like Chris Hani. And to be like Chris Hani is to be disciplined. We are in the middle of a lockdown. We are calling upon all South Africans to actually respect this lockdown, stay indoors, wash your hands, maintain distance, and take all the other things that we are advised to do by the health sector, as well as respect the security forces. We are also saying, as the SACP, to all our cadres in particular, wherever there are opportunities to volunteer, please do so as community health workers and other volunteers, of course, whilst at the same time making sure that you are all safe, just like all our people must be safe, but to be part of the effort to defeat COVID-19. Thank you very much.